And so it's necessary for limits on neuroplasticity. Imagine for a moment that life is a great play, and everyone you meet is an actor performing their part. Some play the hero, some the villain, some the fool. But the curious thing is we forget that we are actors too. And so this are the limits on plasticity and neuroplasticity. We take the play so seriously that when someone shouts at us, criticizes us, or behaves rudely, we believe it's personal. But what if it's not? What if it's just a line in the script? And you don't have to act at all. You see? And so the limits on neuroplasticity. Being bothered by others begins when you believe that their behavior has something to do with you. But most people aren't really seeing you. They're seeing themselves. Every judgment, every insult, equity is necessary. So the limits on neuroplasticity. Every harsh word is simply an echo of their own confusion. It's like standing in front of a mirror that has forgotten it's a mirror. When someone speaks with anger, it's their own storm reflected outward. And if you try to fight the storm, and it's necessary, so the limits on neuroplasticity, you get wet, but if you simply watch it, the thunder, the lightning, the rain, it passes. We are trained from childhood to defend our image, to protect the idea of me. But this image is as fragile as a bubble. The more you guard it, and so the limits on neuroplasticity, the more easily it pops. The trick is not to make the bubble stronger. It's to realize that you're not the bubble at all. You are the space in which it floats. And when you know this, no one can touch you. They may speak, they may act, then you have it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, they may even hate you, but it doesn't land anywhere because there is no wall for it. People will just stick things. People always do, always do. The world will push and pull, demand and resist, but if you stop identifying with the push and pull. And so it's necessary for the limits on neuroplasticity, you come like water, flexible, clear, untouched. Water doesn't argue with the rock. It flows around it. And in time, the rock is shaped by the water, not the other way around. To never be bothered is not to close your heart. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, nor to withdraw from life, is to dance with it lightly, to see the noise, the opinions, the chaos, and smile, because none of it is truly you. The moment you stop trying to control others, you find a deep and effortless peace. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, because when you no longer resist the world can no longer bother you. It simply moves, and you move with it, wink, wind through the trees, like wave blade, eyebrows across the sea, free, undeeply alive, all through our lives. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. We are told that peace lies in control over circumstances, control over people, control over emotions. But if you look carefully, the more you try to control, the more restless you become. And you have it. So the limits on neuroplasticity. The world has a funny way of slipping out of your grip. The tighter you hold it, it's as if life whispers, let go, and life whispers, let go. And I'll show you how light it really is. But we rarely listen because the mind is a restless thing. It wants to fix, correct. And so the limits on neuroplasticity and manage every tiny ripple in the pond of existence. And yet the pond was never meant to be still all the time. The ripples are part of its beauty, to never be bothered by anyone. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you first have to see the nature of being bothered. What does it really mean? Someone says something to you. A word, a glance, and inside a little fire ignites. It's not the word that burns you. It's not the word you attach to it. And so if it is necessary, so the limits on neuroplasticity think, how dare they speak to me that way? Or if you don't respect me, and that thought becomes the match that lights the fire. But if you pose before the thought takes hold, if you just let the sound of the words be what they are, new habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, vibrations in the air, then nothing happens. Fire never starts. The world goes on untouched, and so do you. We live under a great illusion that the opinions of others define our worth. And so what it is necessary for the limits on neuroplasticity. But look closer. The person who praises you today might criticize you tomorrow. Their moods shift like clouds in the wind, and we build our happiness on the passing weather. You can never be free if your peace depends on others' approval. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking for permission to feel good. It's not about becoming indifferent or cold. True detachment is not a wall, it's a clear window. Through it, you see everything, joy, anger, love. And there's necessary limits on the neuroplasticity. So the neuroplasticity, but you don't mistake any of it for yourself. Yourself. When someone then speaks harshly, it's their story, not yours. When someone misunderstands you, it's their perception playing, tricks on you. You can feel compassion for it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, but have to carry it. Imagine someone handing you a heavy bag full of stones. You can take it and struggle under the weight, or you can smile not and gently set it down. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, more the suffering in human life comes from human life comes out of bags that were never ours to begin with. People, they play always from, they put roles shaped by desire, fear, by memory, by desire. When a person lashes out, they're hurting. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, and another competes because they feel small, another gossips because silence makes them uneasy, and all the while we take their actions personally as if they were directed at the core of who we are. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, but that who we are is not something that can be attacked. It has no shape, no boundary. It is awareness. It's silent, space, self-silent, such untouched. When you sit quietly and really look at your mind, you begin to see how automatic your reactions are, that new habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. Someone says a word and instantly a flood of emotion rises. You feel if it hurt, defensive. It happens before you think or even think. But if you can create just a little space between the event and your response, everything changes. You have it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. You're going to witness the play of your mind instead of being pulled into it. And in that witnessing, the power of others over you dissolves. Can't control the ocean, but you can learn to surf. You can't stop the wind. You can adjust your sails. So the limits on neuroplasticity is in the same way you can't stop people from being who they are. You can't make them kind or wise or understanding, but you can choose how you meet them. You can meet them with awareness instead of reaction, with understanding instead of defense. What is necessary, a new habit. And so limits on neuroplasticity, then what they do no longer decides how you feel. There's a strength in not being bothered. It's not the strength of arrogance. It's not the strength of what anyone thinks. It's not, I don't care what anyone thinks, it's knowing that people will think. is necessary to have. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, and they will talk and they will act, but none of that defines you. Their opinions are like echoes in a vast valley. They sound loud for a moment, and then they fade. When you are centered in your own awareness, the echoes cannot disturb you. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. If you spend your days trying to fix others so that they no longer bother you, you'll spend your life chasing shadows. The only real work is to see through your own reactions. The moment someone irritates, you look inward and ask for a new habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. What part of me is being touched? Is it pride, fear, a sense of unworthiness? Every irritation is a doorway to self-understanding. The world is your mirror showing you what still binds you. When you meet it with curiosity instead of resistance. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, even the most difficult people become your teachers. The mind loves to label. This person is toxic, that person rude. But these labels are traps. They keep you stuck in a small world of judgment. And to be as is net so limits on neuroplasticity. Every person is far more than the role they play in a single moment. The one who annoys you today may be carrying a weight he cannot see. The one who insults you might be begging for love in the only way they know how. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, to see this not to justify their behavior, but to free yourself from the need to react. You realize that everyone in some strange way is doing the best within their level of awareness. When you understand this, compassion arises naturally. And for a new habit, as necessity, and so the limits on neuroplasticity, it is the end of being bothered. You cannot truly be angry at someone you deeply understand. You may see their force clearly, but no longer touches you. It's like watching a child throw a tantrum. You don't take it personally. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you simply know they're lost in their own storm. Adults know from only their tantrums and more harm go from subtle. There is a deep peace that comes when you no longer demand that life go away. The world will not always be kind. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, people will not always agree. Circumstances will shift, but the peace that is rooted in awareness doesn't depend on any of that. It's like the stillness beneath the waves, always there, even when the surface is wild. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, so the limits until you begin to see that being bothered is simply up on the surface of your mind. Let the ripple come, let it go. You don't have to dive into it. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. Encounter with that new habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, not the silence of repression, not the kind that hides resentment, but the silence that understands there is nothing to defend. Words are not needed when you are at ease with yourself. When you know who you are, no argument can disturb that knowing. So the limits on neuroplasticity, you become like a mountain, calm, unmoving, watching the clouds drift by. People may shout at the mountain, but the mountain remains vast and silent. To live unbothered does not mean to escape the world. It means to engage with it fully, but lightly. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, to see the comedy and tragedy of human behavior, realize that are part of the same play. You can love people, help them, laugh with them, even feel pain for them. But you don't drown it. That new habit has to flow. So the limits on neuroplasticity, you stay rooted in the awareness that this is all a grand unfolding. The drama of life loses its grip when you remember you're the witness, not the role. There is a beautiful freedom in allowing others to be exactly as they are. And so the limits on the new habit of neuroplasticity, you stop demanding that they understand you, agree with you, or validate you. You no longer expect the world to conform to your script. And when those expectations fall away, so does the suffering. You find that life becomes easier, lighter. And then limits of the limit on neuroplasticity, you can walk through neuroplasticity as a chaos, chant through noise, and remain summonably silence, people say. But if I stop caring what others think, won't I become disconnected, emotionless? No. You will become real. Quickly as necessary. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you will be able to care in a deeper way, not because you need anything in return, because compassion flows naturally from peace. When you are no longer defending your ego, your love becomes effortless. You can listen not needing to correct. Quickly as is necessary to happen. And so limits on neuroplasticity, and without need to be seen, and forgive without needing an apology. Most of what bothers us is not the action itself, but the story about it. Story we tell interrupts. You tell yourself it means interrupts, they don't respect you. So the limits on neuroplasticity, someone forgets to call, you decide they don't care, but these are interpretations, not truths. If you drop the story, the moment is just a moment. There's nothing to fix, nothing to defend. So the limits on neuroplasticity, try sitting quietly, observing how thoughts rise and fall. Notice how one small thought can snowball into a mood. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, he shouldn't have said that, becomes people never appreciate me, which becomes I'm always alone. The mind builds entire worlds out of a single spark. But if you catch the spark before it turns into fire, it burns out harmlessly. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, this is the art of being unbothered, not by suppressing your thoughts, but by seeing through them. The deeper you look, the more you realize that nothing external has ever truly disturbed you. And so it's necessary to follow the head news on neuroplasticity. So the limit, it resists, it's always been your resistance to it. Your inner knows that creates the tension. The moment you stop resisting, peace flows in naturally. It's like unclenching a fist you didn't know you were holding. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you can feel the release in your very being. Life is constantly testing your balance. One moment, everything feels perfect. The next, something changes. Something changes. Someone behaves unfairly. So plan collapses. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the test is not whether you can stop these changes. You can't. The test is whether you can remain centered while they happen. When you are centered, no person can shake you because you no longer lean on them for your sense of stability. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you can think of your peace as a flame within you. When you are unaware, every gust of wind threatens to blow it out. But when you understand that the wind is part of the air, the flame breathes, you stop fearing it. And so it's necessary, so the limits on neuroplasticity. The flame dances with the wind moves but doesn't move. In the same way, when people act out, when situations choose, twist, and turn, your peace doesn't disappear. It just dances with life. There is great power in not reacting. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. The world runs on reaction, action, reaction, back and forth endlessly. The moment you stop reacting, you step out of the cycle. You become unpredictable, free. People can no longer manipulate you because there's nothing to grab onto. and is necessary to form. So limits on neuroplasticity, your calmness becomes your shield. If you practice this long enough, you'll find that being unbothered is not an act of will. It's not something you had to try to do. It happens naturally when you see life as it is. A habit, and so limits on neuroplasticity. You begin to sense that every sound, every movement, every person is part of one vast rhythm. And in that rhythm, nothing is personal. You're part of it, yet beyond it. There will still be moments when emotion rises, anger, sadness, frustration. And this is necessary, so the limits on neuroplasticity, let them come. Don't resist them. Feel them fully, but don't build a home for them. Let them pass through you like wind through an open window. The problem is never the feeling itself, but the story we attach to it. Without the story, and so the limits on neuroplasticity, and pain has a kind of beauty. It comes, it goes, and it leaves you softer, wiser, more open. In time, you realize that the only true freedom is in the freedom to remain peaceful no matter what others do. No one can give that to you. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, and no one can take it away. It is your birthright hidden beneath layers of conditioning. To uncover it, you must simply stop believing every thought that passes through your mind. When you stop taking yourself so seriously, everything becomes lighter. And so it is necessary that the limits on neuroplasticity, you can laugh at your own reactions, your own little dramas. You begin to see that life was never against you. It was only reflecting your own inner state. When you are calm, the world feels calm. When you are chaotic, the world mirrors that chaos. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. And so the key is not to change the world, but to understand yourself. To never be bothered by anyone is not to escape humanity. It's to embrace it completely without losing yourself in it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, it is to walk through life with open eyes and an open heart, knowing that every encounter, every word, every challenge is part of the grand play, and that you, the silent witness behind it all, were never truly touched. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, there is a stillness in you that the world didn't, because it did not give it, and did not give it. The world cannot take it away. The stillness is what it means when every demand has fallen silent. There's no shape, no color. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, no boundary, it simply is. And it is from this quiet space that true strength arises. Not the kind of strength that clenches its fists and resists, but the strength that doesn't need to. Because what can touch you when you are not grasping anything? New habit, and so is this necessary. And there's the limits on neuro from this stillness are this. Other people's moods begin to appear like passing weather. Someone comes with rain, another with thunder, another with sunshine. You don't control any of it. You simply let it move across your sky. Sometimes it pours. And so the limits on the neuroplasticity. Sometimes it's calm, but your sky remains untouched. You are the vastness behind it all. The mistake we make is thinking we are the clouds, always shifting, reacting, changing. But you are not the cloud. You are the space in which the cloud appears. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, once you see this, the drama of others cannot imprison you. We are surrounded by people who are constantly reacting. They are prisoners of their own thoughts. One word triggers a memory, and suddenly they are angry or afraid. Because it's necessary to form a new habit. To new perceive the limits on plugged up like puppets pulled by invisible strings or fear, pride, insecurity. And because they're asleep to this, they believe everyone else is responsible for their emotions. But the truth is, and simply as necessary to the limits on neuroplasticity, no one can truly, if you feel anything, they can offer words, gestures, moments, but so the feeling is born inside you. You are the creator of the storm and also the one who can choose calmness when someone insults you. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the impulse is to resist, to push back, to judge back, to justify yourself. But ask yourself, who are you defending? That feels offended is just an image, a bundle of ideas you gathered from others. If someone calls you foolish, and so the limits on neuroplasticity, and you do not believe yourself to be foolish, their words pass through you like wind through an empty room. It is only when you secretly believe them that the pain begins. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the world has no power over your peace unless you give it permission through identification. Try observing a single moment of irritation, that small, sharp spark that rises when someone cuts in front of you, ignores your words. New habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity or challenges your belief. Watch it without judgment. See how it appears from nowhere, burns brightly for a second and then fades. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to suppress it either. Just watch. The more you observe. So hopefully, as is necessary on neuroplasticity, the limits on more transparent it becomes until one day you see that irritation never belonged to you. It's just another movement of energy in the vast ocean of awareness. People are always trying to change others. People are always trying to behave with their opinions. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, their way of being. But the more you try to mold the world, the more it resists you. People don't change because you want them to. They change because they begin to see themselves clearly. So the wisest thing you can do is to see yourself clearly. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, when you do, you stop reacting in the same old patterns, and that clarity alone changes everything around you. The moment you stop feeding the cycle of conflict, you become a quiet revolution. The world teaches us to compete, to be noticed. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, to prove ourselves. We spend years trying to be significant, and in the process, we become hypersensitive to every little slight of your opinion, every perceived disrespect. But the truth is, there is nothing to prove. You already exist, and that is enough. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. The tree does not compete with the next tree. The bird does not ask for applause. They express what they applaud, what they are, and that expression itself is complete. When you live this way, the opinions of others lose their weight. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you do not need their approval because your being is already whole. Look at how much energy is wasted in defend imaginary self. We carry grudges, replay conversations in our heads, worry about what someone might think, all overshadows. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, limits are is real. It's like arguing with an echo. The moment you stop talking back, the echo fades. Life is full of echoes, people projecting their fears, insecurities, hopes. You can listen without answering, and in that silence, you remain free. new habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, there's something liberating about letting others be wrong about you. The need to be understood as a subtle prison. When you let go of that, an incredible lightness. You find longer need to convince anyone of your worth or your truth. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you simply live it. And if others misunderstand, that's part of their journey. That's part of their journey, not yours. Being bothered is not a technique, it's an understanding. When you see clearly how human minds work, how they are conditioned by fear, desire, habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity and memory, you stop expecting perfection from anyone, including yourself. You begin to see that every action, even the ones that seem cruel or foolish, is an expression of confusion or pain. That realization transforms anger into compassion. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you don't have to approve of someone's behavior to understand its roots. And when you understand, your heart softens and the need to react disappears. Imagine walking through a marketplace. Voices shouting, people bumping into each other. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, in the middle of that chaos, a monk sits quietly, eyes half closed, a faint smile on his lips. The noise still exists, but his mind doesn't fight. He has accepted the chaos as part of the scene. Particularly is necessary to form it, and so the limits on neuroplasticity. That is what it means to be unbothered in daily life, not to escape the noise, but to stop demanding that it be silent. You can do this anywhere, in traffic at work, in conversation. The next time someone speaks sharply, listen not to the tone. It's necessary to the limits on neuroplasticity, but to the energy beneath it. Feel the fear, the tension, the fusion. See how it has nothing to do with you. The words are just the outer shell. The real message is, I am suffering. When you hear that, you can only feel compassion. And so the limits on the neuroplasticity, and compassion dissolves irritation like sunlight melts frost. Most people are not intentionally unkind. They are simply lost in their own storms. They see the world through clouds of thought, through layers of old ones. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you cannot wake them up by shouting back. You wake them up by being awake yourself, by remaining calm when they're chaotic, calm when they're cruel, patient when they're impatient, not out of moral superiority. And so they enter new habits, the limits on neuroplasticity. But because you have seen that reacting only multiplies confusion, there's a profound beauty in becoming transparent to life. It means that the experience passes through without leaving a residue. Pain goes, dude. Praise comes. Praise goes. And it is necessary for the limits on neuroplasticity. You do not cling to it. You live like a mirror, reflecting everything, holding on to nothing. The mirror is not affected by what it shows. It remains pure, silent, clear. This is not something to strive for. Striving itself is the obstacle. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the moment you try to be unbothered, you're already bothered by the idea of needing to be calm. True peace cannot be manufactured. It comes when you stop interfering. Leave it a muddy wall and it clears by itself. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. No reaction, no judgment, no defense, just presence. The world will call it weakness, but it is the highest form of strength. It takes no effort to shout back, to insult. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, to find any fool can do that, but to stand silently in your own awareness, untouchable, that is real power. As you begin to live this way, you will notice that people who once irritated you now amuse you. As is necessary, so the limits on neuroplasticity, you will see the behavior as predictable pattern, a kind of dance they haven't yet noticed they're performing. And when you no longer join the dance, they lose their grip on you. Sometimes even soften into a new habit, so the limits on neuroplasticity, because your calmness mirrors something they've forgotten in themselves. You become a kind of anchor in the storm, not because you're trying to hold the world steady, but because you have discovered the still point within yourself. From that stillness, and so the limits on neuroplasticity, you can love more deeply, laugh more easily, forgive more freely, because nothing can truly hurt you anymore, not because you are invincible, but because there is no one left to be hurt. Every time you are triggered by someone, and so the limits on neuroplasticity, see it as an invitation not to change them, but to change them, to know yourself more deeply. What in you is reacting? What belief is being threatened? What expectation was unmet? Trace it inward, not outward. Each discovery loosens another knot, gradually. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the things that once provoked you lose their power. The noise of the world fades into the background hum of existence, and you rest in the silence behind it. Do not imagine this is a cold, detached existence. On the contrary, and quickness is necessary to form it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, when you are no longer trapped by emotion, you feel everything more vividly. Joy is brighter, love is fuller, even pain has a clarity to it. You're no longer protecting yourself from life, you are living it directly. You can cry without despair. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, laugh without need, speak without fear. This is what it truly means to be free. You start to see that the line between you and others is thinner than you thought. Their pain is your pain, their joy your joy. Now in a sentimental way, you have it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, but as a simple truth, we are all movements of the same ocean. To be unbothered then is not to stand apart from humanity, but to recognize that there is no other. When you see that, forgiveness becomes effortless. As the limits on neuroplasticity. Even the people who seem impossible, the manipulative, the cruel, the arrogant, the manipulative, are part of the same dream. You do not have to invite them into your life, but you can let go of hatred. Hatred poisons only the one who carries it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, to release it is not to excuse their behavior, it's to reclaim your own peace. You do not owe anyone your anger. You may time to find that being unbothered doesn't mean you stop acting. You can still speak truth, stand for justice, as is necessary. Form around it, and so the limits on neuroplasticity. Set boundaries, but you do so without inner turmoil. Your actions arise from clarity, not reaction. You correct what needs correction, but without aggression. You walk away when necessary, but without resentment. That new habit, and so the limits on neuroplasticity begin to live in harmony with the flow of things, not against it. The world is full of noise, endless opinions, comparisons, distractions. If you let it, it will drown out the quiet voice within you that already knows what peace feels like. So the limits on neuroplasticity. So learn to be alone with yourself. Sit in silence sometimes and watch your thoughts drift by. Notice how they come uninvited, and yet you don't have to follow them. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the limits on neuroplasticity, they're like visitors passing through an open door. You can smile at them, let them go. When you practice, a gap appears between you and your thoughts, between you and your emotions. That gap is freedom. In that space, no one can disturb you. Happily as is Nessenab. And so the limit ends no one can neuroplasticity, because entirely is entirely your own. It is not built by effort. It's revealed through awareness. And once you've tasted it, you will never again be completely lost in the noise. People will still come and go. The new about. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, praise and blame will still arise, but your center remains untouched. You will see that life doesn't need to be perfect for you to be peaceful. You just need to stop resisting what is. And so it's necessary to, so the limits on neuroplasticity, and perhaps that's the greatest secret of all, that peace was never something to be achieved. It was always here, quietly waiting beneath the noise of your mind. The moment you stopped looking for it, you find you were standing in it all along. And so the limits on neuroplasticity. So in the end, the secret is not to harden to awaken yourself against the world, but to awaken to the truth that nothing outside you has the power to shake what is real within. The moment you stop fighting the noise, you get in the music behind it. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, the moment you stop defending who you think you are, you discover the vastness of what you truly are, something no insult, no rejection, no misunderstanding can ever touch. To never but is not to live of the world. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, but to live so deeply within it that nothing can pull you away from yourself, let people speak, let life move as it will, let everything rise and fall, and remain still at the center, because when you find that center, new form, new habit. And so the limits on neuroplasticity, you realize that peace is not something to chase or protect. It is what you are. Be the calm in the storm, not because you resist the wind, because you remembered you are the sky.